It's preparing.
Meeting is now live.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Hey there.
Hi. We're just waiting for YouTube to do its thing and all the magic and stuff. And when we see it happen in the other window, there it is. All right. How you doing, Gabe?
I'm doing well, Matt. How you doing?
I'm fantastic. I just need to mute things that happen in the other window. All right. So you just made a really incredible blog post. It was about making time lapses, right?
Yes, it was. It was.
Where were you when you made these time lapses?
Well, we were on, last year, great trips last year, first off. But one of the ones I was looking for the most was this trip that we did to the Eastern Sierras. And we were going to Alabama Hills, which I had never been to, and explored all these great stone sculpture, playground area, very popular Milky Way light painting area. We were also going to Law's Museum, which was, an old sort of train station town, just kept as a museum from 100 years ago. But the one place that I really was like, when this workshop came up and I said, ooh, me, was when the OVRO, the Owens Radio Telescope Observatory, was also going to be on the agenda. And as any night photographer, we are drawn to these places of sort of worshiping the night, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, like when I was on top of Haleakala, there was an observatory there. I was like, yes, can I reach out to them to try to get in there, to no avail. But it was, OVR was very, we had a good relationship with them. Lance has been kind of working with them and teaching workshops at this location for several years. So I was really stoked, mostly about this area. And, when we got there, I was really nervous because I was like, I had so many ideas of what to do. And then it's like, okay, showtime. And I had notes, I put notes on my phone, okay, I wanted to do a time lapse. I'd seen all these really amazing time lapses showing, all these telescopes moving back and forth and stuff like that. They move, they show time, and time lapses are one of the best ways to show time. I also wanted to do an epically long star trail, like 2+ hours, and kind of, really shape it around one of the observatories as well. So those are my two main goals. But when we got there, it was really cloudy, and that doesn't make for good star trails, and exactly, but it makes for great time lapses. And this is sort of one of those things that whenever you go to a place, do your research, and plan, and the more research you do, the better prepared you can be. But if you go there and with an idea, and a very specific idea, and the conditions just aren't allowing that to happen, you've got to pivot. You've got to pivot. You've got to adjust. You've got to, work with the surroundings, and now have that plan B, C, and D, or just play off of what is being dealt to you,
right.
And so I just went sort of full on with the time lapse that night, and as well as helping, we're there with students too. So I just set up something really quick, and then was going around and helping students, and then checking in and kind of thinking and all that. But I wanted to let a time lapse or so rip for a couple hours for this one. So that's the location, that's the inspiration, and that's what led to the first attempt.
Great. I want to see what this is. So let's start looking.
Okay.
Oh, look at that. So walk me through it. So we talked about the Owens Valley Radio Observatory, right?
Yep, exactly. So this is a still shot from teaser here, or that there was a second attempt as well. So this was a still from the second attempt, and that's just a good location of that huge telescope there. That was the one that was searching the skies. So they call that one big ears.
I can't imagine why.
Exactly.
Wow. So you were shooting with a Z6 What kind of lens did you have?
Yep. So I had the go-to 24-70 f4 lens. I'm really waiting for that 14-24 2.8. I think the f4 lens is good enough. That's a workhorse sort of lens, and I really like that lens because of its lightweightness and just fits that camera and doesn't make it too heavy. And I like getting that distance. I'm trying this year to shoot less wide, if that could be a thing. And you've inspired me over the years by bringing a 70-200, to a night workshop, and I'm like, what are you doing? What do you say? Who shoots night photography 70-200? But you've proven to me that there's some more fun. So with the first attempt of this, I was really excited. I set up farther, about a couple hundred yards away from the telescope, and was more at a medium focal length. I have to take a look at the data, but I think I was probably at 35 or 50 millimeters on it. But here's the key thing is, like I said, I was excited. I wanted to, we got to location. I just immediately scouted the scene. And first things when we do a workshop, I say, okay, everyone just look around first. Look around, see what you're interested in, and then, start getting to work. And so I jumped off. I kind of knew what I wanted to do, ran over, got this set up, and I kind of defaulted to some of my standard settings as a night photographer. And that was, I set up basically vertically, which is kind of a big no-no in the time-lapse world, unless you're just making time lapses for phones. And I also set up for sort of a typical long exposure. I was set up at like a 2-minute exposure. And so really the core of time lapses is you need lots of frames, lots of still frames to make a movie. And by sort of defaulting to my 2-minute exposure, which was a good, there was a good exposure to show the movement of clouds, to show a little bit of the movement of the telescope and everything, but it only gave me like 90 frames to work with in the time lapse. So if you play the time lapse, you can see it's cool, it's fun, but it's like 8 seconds long. So you let it buffer up. But I love the movement of clouds, and I love that the sort of the trailing of that telescope as well as it kind of moves around. I love seeing that movement in it. So lesson learned. I did, again, I kind of let this rip, and I didn't have another chance to do a time lapse that night. I just kind of did that, and then was helping the students, and maybe had another camera and was setting up a couple other sort of things. Nothing I can really write home about. But that was sort of the focus of that night, was to get that time lapse. And so I was like, what did I do? And all the excitement, I made mistakes.
We all do that, Gabe.
And yeah, exactly. But luckily, we had another opportunity to go back, and so that worked out nice. And then this time,
so what did you do differently?
I came prepared. Well, first off, I knew I was going to be shooting horizontally. See, even I default to wanting to. I always shoot. I'm such a vertical guy. I always want to. It's just like the tripod and the ball head are all set up. The L bracket's like, what do you mean you want to go down over there? I don't know. You usually stand up, But we had sort of a open night with and we kind of all decided what to do. We were going to go. Typically, it was set for laws, but a lot of the students were like, "Hey, we want another crack at that at the Owens." So I relied on an old friend, Photo Pills. They have, guess what? They've got a pill, which is a solution, right? They've got a pill for everything, including a pill for time lapse. It's a pretty basic one. There are other lots of other apps and lots of other ways online that you can use to configure it. But hey, I've got Photo Pills. I use and love Photo Pills, and I can simply and easily use that time lapse. So by clicking on that pill, You can see the second screen that comes up there. And then you just input sort of what you, what stats you kind of want to put in there. So so I put in, hey, I know 2 minutes too long, right? So I need to go for an exposure that's going to be somewhere between maybe 8 seconds and 30 seconds. And I said, I'm going to err, more with, the shorter exposures and get more, because the weather was clear that night, that's good. So I went with an 8-second exposure. And then if you look at, okay, then you set it for, okay, I've got 2 hours at this location, or I have 2 hours before the battery runs out, whatever. And then you could also input your frame rate. And, the 25 frames per second, 25 to 30 frames per second is sort of normal, so the way of viewing movies. So as you can see below, whatever you input in that top section, it then gives you what your clip length and number of photos and total memory usage. So you make sure that you have the right amount of the right memory card, the number, and it also will let you know kind of what your output by using that 25 frames per second as the sort of as your output for combining all these still frames together. I should come up with a 36-second time lapse, which, I think for a time lapse that's just showcasing Owens, I was just doing one setup, one shot. I think you're looking at something that really should be 15 to 30 seconds. Professional time lapses that kind of are running 2 to 3 rigs at a scene and capturing different viewpoints and stuff like that. They're running all night, and they're getting hours and hours of information that'll result in maybe a 4 to 8 minute time lapse.
Right.
So I was very happy. I just wanted something simple, 15, 30 seconds.
Now, when you say 4 to 8 minutes, you're talking about 4 to 8 minutes runtime?
Yes, runtime. When you take all the stills and then put them together and run them as 25 frames per second, 30 frames per second, like that original one, I had so few frames that it runs a little slow. I
it was 7 seconds.
Yes, like 7 seconds, but I also put it together as I think 10 or 12 frames per second.
So
it runs it a little slower.
Right.
So.
All right, so let's get down to the rest of the settings here. So you did 8 seconds, 5, 6, 1600, and you were set the bulb, and you set up your shutter boss with a 1 second interval between those shots, and you let it rip for 2 hours.
For 2 hours, exactly.
So this means patience, right?
Well, again, I was helping other people there in the field, but I again set up right at the beginning. I went closer for this one. I said, okay, I want to get closer. There wasn't clouds in the scene, so I didn't have to. I wasn't looking for a bigger sky to let that movement come in. So I went for a little bit more of a closer, intimate look at Big Ears, and really showcase that movement. And when I was composing, I could see the movements going on, and I was very careful to make sure that, hey, I'm seeing it go a little bit. I want to make sure that the telescope is not going to be moving out of the frame.
Right.
So that was the key part of me putting the composition together.
So now that you've shot all these, we talked about in the blog post, we talked about doing the post-production first, or before we give the big reveal on how well it came out, which I love the time lapse. Talk me through the post-production a little bit here.
Yeah, so I dabble in the time lapse world, and for me, I love using Photoshop for it. About 2 or 3 years ago, Photoshop introduced a simple time lapse feature for photographers who didn't want to learn or purchase or have the time, to comprehend like Premiere. So that Premiere can do a whole lot. If Premiere is doing editing on a grand scale, and you can do all sorts of stuff with it. But Photoshop, similar to QuickTime, for those, and that's QuickTime Pro, just gave a little bit more of a simpler approach and using tools that I was familiar with.
Right.
So I really, I wanted to use Photoshop with this, and that's something that a lot of our students, our clients are using too, and it's a great way for us to kind of just say, hey, do I like time lapse?
Right.
Try it kind of for free, you know,
Yep.
because most of us already have Photoshop. So, and so I wanted to share that with you. So let's go through the nitty gritty on how in Photoshop you can make really cool time lapses.
All right. Here we
So,
go.
yeah, first thing first, I'm working in Lightroom first. You know, Photoshop is for the other stuff, the heavy lifting stuff. And when in Lightroom, you're going to select your images. Now, the important thing is, you know, work on your images, do what you need to do on them, sync it all up. And then it's the export that is really key here, because then we're not going to open them up in Photoshop. We're going to export them out and then re-import them the old-fashioned way. And for what's really key is you want to rename them and you want to number them, and they have to, you know, they have to go start with 1 and go. There's no breaks in those numbers, so make sure you have all the numbers and all the images lined up. There can be skips, of course, in what you choose, but as long as the numbers of the images being exported line up, then you're good to go. If you want them in HD, then you want to do click on the resize to fit box and select 1920, and that'll give you HD quality time lapse. Yep, there you go. And if you want 4K, then select 3840 as the on the long end of the export. So that's the key thing there for making sure that the exporter is going to rename them, and you're going to add the numerical numbering of it, and then you're going to choose that correct one. Now, if you have an old computer, then you might want to choose that HD. So you're dealing with a smaller file size. But if you've got a computer from the last 3 or 4 years, then you should definitely go for 4K. Always better have more information, and then you can edit down. So once you export them out, you're going to put them in a folder that's easy for you to find, and then open up Photoshop, and then go File, Open, and which opens up a dialog that you can see right there. And the key thing here is all you have to do is you got to click on the first number of the sequence, and then you'll notice that you need to also click on Image Sequence. If you do not see that box, cancel out and go back into File, Open, because you need to click that. That is very important. Yeah, keep drawing lines over that. It's like, do we have a highlighter? We have a highlighter? Let's get a highlighter. Exactly. So, yes, and having these JPEGs as well, that's totally fine. We don't need TIFFs. We don't need, we just need lots of good resolution files. Remember, each one of these single files is going to last a fraction of a second, right? If we're playing them 24 frames per second, then we can be fine with a JPEG. So, yes, check mark, image sequence. Okay, hit open. Let's do this.
Oh, check marks everywhere.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So once you check that and then press open, then Photoshop opens up, and it'll open up with hopefully a timeline in it. Now, if you've used Timeline before, it will open up with it. If you have never used the timeline feature, the timeline bar, then you're going to have to go into Window. So go up to Photoshop and go to the window, and then we're going to click on Timeline. Make sure that it's got a checkbox. And there you see it right at the bottom right there. And we need that timeline, and because that's sort of the editing space for videos. And this is something similar that will, if you do like this will look very similar in Premiere, except we'll add a bunch more stuff. So so that should pop up. If not, again, open up the timeline. And then all you have to do is just kind of brings it all in, and then just hit press play or your space bar. And the first time it plays through, it's probably not going to look good because it's kind of buffering and assembling them together. So don't get too concerned or worried about how it looks that first time. But then after it ends, play it again, and then you should see it go through pretty smoothly from that. Now you can do some basic editing, like adding music, crossfades, all that kind of stuff like that. That's pretty easy to add in at the beginning, at the end. Music is key. I will say I didn't add music to this one just because I get so confused with what music I can add. You know, what's the free music? What's
I have
the,
a tip. Can I jump
okay,
in? I have a tip here.
jump in. Yeah.
Upload it to YouTube, and once you get there, you can click edit on the video and choose from a whole bunch of appropriate royalty-free
Free.
music that can just be added to your video once you get it up to YouTube.
Excellent. All right, we'll check that out. Let's fix that one then in there. And of course, this is also a great way that if you have friends that are musicians, or you know, or you have really songs that you really like, you can always buy that. If you buy those songs that are, if you really feel, hey, my photography, my time lapse is really keyed in with specific songs, you can also buy those too. And what are you, artists?
If you guys are interested, NPAN uses artlist.io for our music when we edit videos.
Cool. They have Massive Attack on there?
I haven't checked, but they have a whole bunch of really good sounding music there.
Nice. It's really important, because obviously if this is going to live in on YouTube, on Vimeo, all those places, then you want to make sure that you're using that stuff, that you're not stealing people's music, and you're using rights-free stuff or supporting the musicians.
Yep.
Okay. So,
all right, how do we export it?
Okay, so once you've got done with Photoshop can only do a few simple things. But once you're done with the editing, export is also the main thing to do here. And this is really what we've got highlighted there. You're going to select File, Export, and render the video. So for the photographer, they might not understand that jargon as much, but we are basically looking for export and then render the video. Looking at this from top to bottom, name, you can obviously rename this, give it a name that you can remember, and choose a place that you'll also remember, whether it's a specific movies folder, or I generally keep these images with the stills, and I have a time-lapse folder. So you can see here, I renamed it OVRO version 2, and it's going to my LaCie hard drive with the Eastern Sierras folder within the time-lapse section. So the other stuff is pretty easy, and the default is pretty good. I use the Adobe Media Encoder, the format H.264. That's a very good format with a high quality. I don't see why you would choose anything else. And then it gives your sizing for it and the frame rate. So I chose that 23.976, which is the sort of the more realistic one.
Yeah, that's the cine style. Yeah, that's cinema style. Yeah, movies are generally 24 frames per second. Internet videos either 30, or if you want it to look in sports is like 60 frames per second. So if you want it to look like cinema, 24 frames per second.
Perfect. Thank you, Matt.
Welcome.
And then basically from here, you hit the render. And that should take, depending upon how many images, that should take anywhere from a minute to 5 minutes to put everything together. And then you are ready to share it with the world.
Can I get a drum roll, Gabe?
So speaking of sharing
it. Here comes the drum roll.
That woke Theo up.
Oh.
All right, so here we are. Let's get to full screen. And then, so these are all 8-second exposures. So the movement, especially when it's quick, there's still a little blur, which I like, but it's way smoother, right? It's a way smoother. And this got, again, this was about 2.5 hours that I was shooting here. It's searching. Big Ears is looking or listening.
So cool.
So
I want to watch this all night.
Right, and then I waited for a airplane trail to come in, and then fade.
Boom! I want to watch it again.
Yeah. Wow. So you could see some of it. Right. I wish there was a little bit more movement. You could see some car trails on the left, and some stars and stuff like that. A couple. There was someone light painting something over there. But yeah, this was super fun. Very happy to have one of my first successful and smooth time lapses completed.
Gabe, you nailed it, man. That is gorgeous.
I wouldn't mind going back. I wouldn't mind going another crack. Because again, Matt, what about next time we go back and there's clouds, and showing that
Right.
movement? What if next
Oh,
time
yeah.
there's other things, to do, or setting up 2 rigs and really showing more of that location there, because there was, of the big telescopes, there was at least like 10 of them there, and then they have like a lot of medium-sized ones, and then they have a lot
Yeah.
of small ones there. So there's over 100 of those telescopes that are
Amazing.
pretty special place.
Now there's a variety of ways to edit this. You showed us one way, which is a great starter way to go through Photoshop. At the end of your blog post, you mentioned another way,
Yes.
which is a plugin, right?
Yeah, it's a LR Time-Lapse, and this one has been a very popular one for people that, for photographers and people that are very familiar and strong in Lightroom. I've really only been looking at it. I haven't really done a dive into it yet. I'm very excited to do it because I really like Lightroom. So finding something that integrates with something I already am familiar with will ease that learning curve.
Right.
And they have a lot of more fun things, because I know, when I was first making time lapses and movies in the iMovie days, one thing I really loved doing was I love playing, go figure, with time, and I love speeding things up, slowing things down, like putting a hold on a moment, freezing it there, and then speeding things up again. And that's something that Lightroom Time-Lapse, as well as Premiere, could do. That's not something that Photoshop could do. Photoshop's just going to put it all together as a simple, time-lapse. You choose your frame rate. That's it. But the other programs will be definitely more powerful in adding that kind of thing. So obviously we have a little bit more time on our hands right now. So I am, one of the things that I have on my checklist is to, again, get a deep dive into Lightroom Time-Lapse and revisit this project. So you might see a blog post that kind of goes back to this and reprocesses it in a different way.
I look forward to that, Gabe.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Wow, this has been exciting. I can't wait to see what you do with that. Thank you all for tuning in. Gabe, thanks for spending your evening with us. This is part of our series. We've been talking about this for a while, but we finally pulled the trigger on it, where we've put a lot of time and care into writing blog posts generally every week. And this is another way to explain the sometimes complex topics that we address in writing on our website. So thanks you for joining us for what we're lovingly calling BlogChat now.
BlogChat.
And we have a lot of good things going on here on YouTube. Please take a moment so that next time we go live, by hitting the subscribe button and then the little dinger next to it to enable notifications. Then you will get not only an email, but also if you're on YouTube at the time, you'll get a notification that we're going live. For this week, I'm going to say it now. We're going to announce it tomorrow, but for this week, we're going to be doing one of these each night this week. So, yeah, and each of us is going to pop up and have a little blog chat. So this is the first in the series of doing it live, and there's something beautiful about doing it live. We get to get your questions. So we've been watching over on the side, and I'm going to take a look right now to see if there are any questions. S. Cantor dropped in and said, "Excellent. Thanks for sharing this, Gabe." So
you're welcome. Good to see you.
And Prabhat said hello to Tim, and Chris also provided a link. So the LR time-lapse. And this is thank you all. So we don't have any questions now. And then there's there's more people saying that they really enjoyed the live stream. So Gabe, thank you so much for being brave and stepping up and doing the live stream. I look forward to more.
I'm a shy guy. I'm a shy guy.
Yeah, you're so shy. More broadcasts from the dark room, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Matt, don't forget, we have to seize the night.
Seize the night. Yeah, that's why we only live stream at night.
That's it. We can't seize the day.
So far, yeah. Yeah. So deepest thanks to all of you who read our blog, who have attended our workshops, and will participate with all of the other things that we're planning on doing in the near future. We appreciate you from the bottom of our hearts. Thank you for loving night photography and joining us. Until next time, goodbye from Matt. Goodbye
Bye from Gabe.
Awesome. And thank you all. We'll see you soon.